The scripture reading before the lesson will come from Matthew 24, 42 through 51. Again, that's Matthew 24, 42 through 51. I'll be reading from the King James Version. Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come. But know this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not the Son of Man cometh. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household, to give them meat in due season? Blessed is that servant, whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. Verily I say unto you, that he shall make him ruler over all his goods. And if that evil servant shall say in his heart, My Lord delayeth his coming, and shall begin to smite his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunken, the Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he looketh not for him, in an hour that he is not aware of, and shall cut him asunder, and appoint him his proportion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
God placed every book, chapter, verse, and even every word in the Bible for a reason. Ephesians 3 through 5 gives us some insight as to why. How that by revelation he made known unto me the mystery, as I wrote afore in few words, whereby when ye read, you may understand my knowledge in the mystery of Christ, which in other ages was not made known unto the sons of men, as it is now revealed unto his holy apostles and prophets by the Spirit. Did you notice it? Read and understand. Ephesians 5:17, listen to this admonition. Wherefore be ye not unwise, but understanding what the will of the Lord is. So how are we going to understand what the will of the Lord is? We're going to have to read. We're going to have to read what's written in the Bible. Jehovah is not the author of any sort of confusion, religious or otherwise, based on 1 Corinthians 14:33. When religious confusion exists, it is always because we have not put in the amount of effort needed to understand the text. Perhaps more churchgoers, as we'll call them, are confused about Matthew chapter 24 than most other chapters of the Bible. So if you have your Bibles, go ahead and open them to Matthew chapter 24, because that's where we're going to be today. Is it God's fault that we don't understand Matthew chapter 24? No. Is it our fault that we don't understand Matthew chapter 24? Yes. How do we remedy this problem? Get to work by reading the text. And there's a promise. When we read, we can understand. This morning's sermon is entitled, Watch and Be Ready. What are we going to do? We're going to go through Matthew chapter 24. Are we going to read every verse? No, we are not. We're going to try to give an accurate exegesis, I suppose you could say, of Matthew 24, and we're going to try to understand it better than before we came in here this day. First thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the difficulties. What are the difficulties in understanding Matthew chapter 24? I want to suggest two things. Number one, we have a failure, or there is a failure many times, to understand the context. What's going on in Matthew 24? Well, this is the last week before Jesus' crucifixion. And it really begins in Matthew chapter 21. Matthew 21 begins what we generally know as the final week. That is, before Jesus' crucifixion. And Matthew 24 is parallel with Mark 13 and Luke 21. So if we want to see all of what God has to say about this subject that we're going to see, or subjects rather, that we're going to see in Matthew 24, we also need to read Mark 13 and Luke 21. Jesus is now in Jerusalem, and he spends much of his time in and around the temple area. Notice what the text says beginning in Matthew 24 and verse number 1. Last week, we're in Jerusalem. Here we see. And Jesus went out and departed from where? The temple. We know we're in Jerusalem. The literal temple that was in the literal city of Jerusalem. and his disciples. When you look at the parallel account, Peter, Andrew, James, and John are the ones that we can prove were there with him. His disciples came to him for to show him the buildings of the temple. Look at all these beautiful buildings in and around where? The temple. Where was the temple? In Jerusalem. Verse number 2. Now watch. And Jesus said unto them, See ye not all these things? All what things, Lord? All these things regarding the buildings of the temple in and around the city of Jerusalem. Is that reasonable? Yes, it is, isn't it? See ye not all these things? Verily, truly, I say unto you, there shall not be left here. Here where? In Jerusalem, specifically in that temple area. There shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. Now watch how his disciples, at least Peter, Andrew, James, and John, watch how they perceive Jesus' statement. Verse number 3, and as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, just barely outside the city gates of Jerusalem, the disciples, who seems to be Peter, Andrew, James, and John for sure, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? What things? Well, what did Jesus just finish saying? Look at these stones right here. The day is coming when, or the days rather are coming, when there's not going to be one stone here left on top of another. When shall these things be? What is that? When is Jerusalem going to fall? When is this temple going to be destroyed? Is that reasonable? That's not hard to see when you take the time to read the text, right? Tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming? They equated, when this temple falls, that's going to be it. And, notice, what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? Now, those are legitimate questions. They're asked from people who perhaps don't understand the full import of what they've asked. But Jesus is going to answer them, and he's going to answer them in the context that they gave them. What's the first thing they asked? Tell us, when shall these things be? So the first thing that Jesus is going to answer in this context is what? He's going to tell when you're going to be able to know that the stones of this temple and in and around Jerusalem are not going to be left one on top of another. Now, what's the first difficulty in understanding Matthew 24? We don't read the text. We're not trying to read it in its context, but then there's a second problem. Many times the difficulties arise because we're seeking to discover the present day application before grasping the ancient meaning. Meaning, we look at the Bible and say, how does this apply? Well, first you got to say, what does this mean? If we don't know what it means, we're never going to be able to apply it correctly. A general rule for good Bible study is to, number one, read the text. In other words, what does it say? Number one, read the text and say, what does this say? Then, number two, grasp the meaning of the text. What does it say? What does it mean? Right? This isn't hard to understand, is it? Then, number three, determine an accurate modern-day application. Ask yourself this: how does this help me get to heaven? So what's the order? What does it say? What does it mean? How does this help me get to heaven? That's good Bible study, wouldn't you say? What does it say? What does it mean? How does this help me get to heaven? But you know what the problem is? That's not the way we do it. That's not the way we do it, is it? We want to say, how does this apply to me today? Oh, I heard about an earthquake somewhere. Oh, let me find a Bible verse that says something about an earthquake. There it is. Jesus said something about an earthquake, so that he was talking about what happened across the other side of the world yesterday, right? Wait a minute. What's the rule of good Bible study? What does it say? What does it mean? How does it apply? That's not hard to understand. Are we reading the text, brethren, to find the meaning, or are we reading the text to find the application? Which one should come first? Get the meaning first, then search out the application. Many times, the inspired writer provides the meaning and the application within the same context. That's exactly what happens in Matthew chapter 24. Jesus, who's the Son of God, the only begotten Son of God, is going to say it. He's going to tell us what it means, and then he's going to apply it for us if we'll take the time to read the text. Look with me in verse number 7 of Matthew 24. How many times can a prophecy be fulfilled? Once. It's fulfilled once. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Is that going on today? Well, to some degree, there are earthquakes and pestilences, all kinds of things going on. But guess what? They always have been. They always have been. So what are the difficulties? We fail to understand the context, and we're seeking to find the application before we discover the meaning. Now, second, let's talk about the divisions of Matthew chapter 24. And there are two primary divisions within this chapter. In Matthew 24, really verses 1 through 35, you're going to see those days. Look at verse 19. Woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. Do you see that? Is that what it says? Now look at verse number 22. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Look at verse number 29. Immediately after the tribulation of what? Those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Now, did you see that? Did you read that from your own Bible? Those days, those days, those days, those. Did you see that? That came right out of Jesus' mouth, and Matthew recorded it exactly how he said it, didn't he? By inspiration of the Holy Spirit. That's exactly what Jesus said. Okay. An honest, unbiased reading of Matthew chapter 24 shows that at least two distinct events are under consideration. We're going to see as we move forward. There would be obvious and visible signs concerning one event, and there would be no obvious and visible signs concerning another event. So let's state it plainly. The entirety of Matthew 24, 1 through 35, just skip the first three verses if you want to say verses 4 through 35, the entirety is about the events leading up to and including the AD 70 destruction of Jerusalem at the hands of the Roman armies. Watch. Let me show you something in this text, and it's going to involve a three-letter word, and it's called S-E-E. When you see something, what does that mean? Do you see me standing up here behind this pulpit? What does that mean? Jesus says, and he's speaking to Peter, Andrew, James, and John, we can prove that. When he says that they're going to see something, what does that mean? They're going to see it, right? Look at verse 15, Matthew 24. When ye, now ask yourself, who's speaking? It's in red letters, so that kind of helps the son, doesn't it? Jesus is speaking. To whom is he speaking? We can prove Peter, Andrew, James, and John from the parallels. When ye therefore shall see. When Peter, Andrew, James, and John were going to see something, what were they going to see? They were going to see the abomination of desolation. Ooh, isn't that China? Or Russia? Well, how could Peter, Andrew, James, and John see that? Standing in Jerusalem, in and around the temple area. You explain that. But we don't think that much when we read the text, do we? We're searching for some type of a grand, something to just reach out there and grab and say, oh, I found something that no one else can understand. Not true. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. That means Daniel wrote something about this abomination of desolation. What do you think the holy place would be? Is it Lexington, North Carolina? It's the temple in Jerusalem, in and around that area. And then Matthew adds by inspiration, whoso readeth, what does he say? Let him understand. That means God's word is designed to be understood. Pay attention. Read this, see it, know it. We'll explain that in a minute. Look down at verses 33 and 34. So likewise ye. Who's speaking? Jesus is speaking. To whom is he speaking? Peter, Andrew, James, and John. So likewise ye, when ye shall see. See what? see all these things. What things? That means everything that he has said up to this point in time in the chapter. When you shall see all these things, know, not think or feel, know that it, what it? Well, see the destruction of Jerusalem. It is near, even at the doors. Verily, truly, I say unto you, this generation. Question, what generation? Obviously, he's talking about 21st century Americans, isn't he? You got that from reading the text, didn't you? No, you didn't. That generation then. This generation, the generation that was alive in Jesus' day when he was standing in the temple area at the Mount of Olives at Jerusalem. This generation shall not pass till how many of these things? Till all these things be what? Filled full. Till all these things. What things? What things? The things with regard to the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. Till all these things be fulfilled. Do you see it? You could see it, you could see it, you could know it, you could see it, you could know it. Now, there's a contrast. Because in verses 36 through 51, instead of those days, Jesus begins speaking of that day and hour. Notice, those days, those days, those days, see it, know it, but. Look at verse number 36. Of that day and hour. Here's the transition text. The first thing Jesus was asked in verse 3, tell us when shall these things be? He's answered it. Now, the next two questions are really one. What shall be the sign of thy coming into the end of the world? So he answered the first one in verses 4 through 35. Verse 36, all the way really through the end of Matthew 25. Watch. But of that day and hour. He doesn't say those days. He says that day and hour knoweth no man, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. Notice verse 42. Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour. Notice it was those days, but now it's that day, and now he's getting down to the hour, isn't he? Notice verse 44. Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not the Son of Man cometh. Notice verse 50. The Lord of that servant shall come in a day, not those days, in a day, when he looketh not for him, and in an hour that he is not aware of. Now, verse 36 is the transition text. Jesus begins answering their second question and continues again all the way through the end of chapter 25. The second event under consideration is often what we call the second coming of Christ. There will be no obvious and visible signs that we can see outside of what the Bible declares. Think. Now watch, think. Do you know Jesus to be a liar? Do you know Jesus to be mistaken in anything? He said in verses 33 and 34, you're going to see it and know it. Then all of a sudden he says, of that day and hour, nobody knows. I don't even know. The Father only knows. The angels in heaven don't even know. And he's talking about the same day? That won't work. That simply will not work. Peter, Andrew, James, and John could know that something was near, even at the doors, while verse 36 states, no one knows, nor can know, save the Father which is in heaven. You know what Jesus begins talking about in verse 36? The last day. Jesus talked a lot about the last day. Let that sink in. What was the first day? Hadn't we read Genesis 1? Evening and the morning were the first day. So what's the last day going to be? Wherever there's an evening and a morning, it's going to stop. Has that happened yet? No, it hasn't. So the last day has not occurred. John 12:48, he that rejecteth me and receiveth not my words hath one that judgeth him. The word that I have spoken, the same shall judge him in the last day. Who knows when the last day is going to occur? Nobody. You can't see it. There are no signs that are going to say, oh, Jesus is coming soon. How do you know that? How do you know that? You don't know that. He could come soon, but time may continue on for who knows how long. Now, third, let's talk about the destruction. And the destruction in this context is the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans in AD 70. Again, we're looking at Matthew 24, 1 through 35. Matthew 24, 1 through 35 is history. Now, I'm going to stand up here and say that, and I'm going to look at as many people as I can in their face and say that, and it's still not going to register. Matthew 24, 1 through 35 is history. Do you know what Matthew 24 proves? It proves that both Jesus and Matthew were inspired prophets of God. They did not make this up. They did not write it after it already occurred. They predicted it. How did they do it? By inspiration of the Holy Spirit. That's plain. Now in Matthew 24 verses 4 through 14, there are divers signs. In other words, there are some general signs that were to occur in and around the time period including the AD 70 destruction of Jerusalem. Look back at verse number 6. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. Is that not generally true for all of humanity's history? That is a general sign. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass. But the end, what end? What did the disciples ask him? When are these things going to be? When are these stones here at the temple going to be torn down? The end of that temple is not yet. Look at it. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass. But the end of the temple, the end of Jerusalem, as it were, is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in divers places. That's generally true all the time, isn't it? Is it not? And all these things, verse number 8, are the beginning of sorrows. What is this in its context? From an unbiased reading of the context, how does this apply to 21st century America? It cannot happen. That does not fit the context, does it? No. Now, in Matthew 24, verses 15 through 21, there are some distinct signs. Now, where the first batch were kind of general, they get pretty specific. Notice verse 15 again. If I were to ask you, what is the abomination of desolation, what would you say? When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation. If you look at Luke 21, verses 20 and 24, do you know what the abomination of desolation was? It was the Roman armies. Why were they called abomination? They ate things like swine and pigs. They ate bacon and pork chops. And the Jews, to them, that was abominable. Why were they called a desolation? Why would they be called the abomination of desolation? Because they're going to tear that place down. They're going to burn it with fire, and Josephus records that the blood put out the fires. Now, if that's not destruction, I don't know what would be. Notice it, the abomination of desolation spoken of. Here the true prophets harmonized. By Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. You look through the Bible and you will see the holy place is either the tabernacle or the temple. The tabernacle's been gone because they built the temple in Solomon's day. They were going to see the abomination of desolation stand in the temple. Gentiles had no business in that temple, but they were coming anyway. Now watch what is written by Matthew by inspiration. Whoso readeth, let him understand. If you got to go back to Daniel and reread Daniel, see what he's talking about. He's talking about the Roman armies in and around Jerusalem. Now notice verse 21. For then, politely ask, when is then? When the abomination of desolation was standing in the holy place. That's history, friend. And it happened just like Jesus said it would. For then shall be great tribulation. Did Jesus have in mind 21st century America when he said that? He did not. The context does not prove that. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Let me tell you where you didn't want to be. You didn't want to be in and around the city of Jerusalem between AD 66 and AD 70. It was bad. It was horrible. It was terrible. Who said it? I read it in my Bible. That's what Jesus said. Now in Matthew 24, verses 22 to 28, we're going to see the deception. Notice verses 24 and 25. Jesus, still speaking, says, for there shall arise false Christs. What's this in the context of? The destruction of Jerusalem. Now that's still generally true even today. For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders. They're false signs. Insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect, the called, the chosen of God, those who choose his plan. Verse 25, behold, I have told you before. Jesus standing there in Jerusalem in the temple area is saying, I have told you all this is going to happen before it happens. Now, when did Matthew write it? Did Matthew write it after he stood there and watched it? No. Matthew wrote it by inspiration of the Holy Spirit, just like Jesus said it by inspiration of the Holy Spirit. What does this prove? Jesus says, behold, I have told you before. What history does is validate both Jesus and Matthew as being true prophets of God. You cannot mess with that. He said it before it was going to happen, and it happened just like he said it was going to happen. Matthew 24, 29 to 35, we're going to see the destruction. Again, look back at verses 33 through 35. They cannot be ignored. Either they're true or untrue. Verse 33, so likewise ye, who's the ye? When ye shall see. See, what does the word see mean? S-E-E. When ye shall see all these things, everything that he's spoken of in that context, no. He doesn't say think, he doesn't say feel. So likewise ye, when ye shall see all these things, know that the end of the temple is near. Even at the doors, verily, truly, I say unto you, this generation, what generation? That one way back yonder. This generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. Is Jesus a liar? Is Jesus mistaken? He said it just like it was, and that is exactly how it came to be. Now, fourth, let's talk about the dedication. That is the dedication to watch and be ready for Christ's second coming. Again, where's the transition text in Matthew 24? It's verse 36. Now, what Jesus does here in Matthew 24, 36, really through the end of the chapter, is going to provide an explanation and an application of the things that he has just said. Now, notice verses 36 through 39. But, in contrast to you seeing and knowing, in contrast, but of that day and hour, this is the last day, Christ's second coming, knoweth no man. Know not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. Now watch how he begins to compare it. But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. To what extent, Lord? For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage. Now that doesn't sound like where he said those in Judea to run to the hills. He told those in Judea, when you saw the abomination of desolation come, you need to go and run to the hills. But of this day, people are marrying, eating and drinking, giving in marriage. They're living life just like it's a normal day. Right? Don't you see that? For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. It's going to happen very suddenly. It's going to happen very quickly. There's not going to be all these signs and wars of rumors of wars. All those things happen all the time anyway. And knew not until the flood came and took them all away, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. As the universal worldwide flood came with a suddenness and quickness that was unprecedented, so shall be the coming of the Son of Man. Now, preacher, what are you going to do with verses 40 and 41? Because now you've stuck your foot in your mouth. You've already said that verses 36 in Matthew 24 all the way through the end of chapter 25, they're all about the second coming of Christ. Well, don't you know that verses 40 and 41 teach the rapture? No, they don't. Let's see. Verse 40. This is in the context of the second coming of Christ. Then, what do you mean then? This is going to be at the last day, the second coming. Then shall two be in the field. The one shall be taken, and the other left. Verse 41. Two women shall be grinding at the mill. The one shall be taken, and the other left. Oh, no. What are you going to do now? Well, let me tell you what the text doesn't say. The text does not tell you how long they'll be left behind, so to speak. But you know, Jesus dealt with how long they're going to be left behind in John 5, 28 and 29. Marvel not at this, for the hour. What did he say? For the hour is coming in the which all that are in the grave shall hear his voice and shall come forth. They that have done good unto the resurrection of life, and they that have done evil unto the resurrection of damnation. But you say, preacher, it's not talking about the resurrection. Well, perhaps you want to read 1 Corinthians 15:52. For those of us who are alive and remain, it'll be in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. You know what a twinkling of an eye is? It's that moment right before you blink. That fast. How long will the one be left behind? As long as it takes for you to blink your eye. That's how long. There is no 1,000-year being left behind. There is no 7 years of tribulation. You don't get that from the Bible. You don't get that especially from reading the text. He's focused on the righteous, but he'll deal with the wicked here just in a second. Now, what about Matthew 24, 52, or 42 rather, through 51? We don't have to stretch the text to find an application. Why? Because verses 42 through 51 provide the application of everything stated by Jesus in this chapter. Especially in view of his second coming. What's the application, Lord? Watch and be ready. Why, Lord? For you don't know the day or the hour. There's the application. So we don't have to go searching around saying, what does all this mean to us? Jesus tells us. Look at verse 42. What does he say? Watch. Watch therefore. Therefore is a conclusion word, isn't it? Watch therefore, and then he tells us why. For ye know not what hour your Lord doth come. Don't you know that every person, every religion that has predicted, so to speak, the second coming of Christ, missed it? Who's been right the whole time? Jesus. You don't know, but you need to live like it could happen today, right now. Verse 43, but know this, that if the goodman of the house had known, notice, think back in your mind, you're going to see it and you're going to know it. Now he's saying, there are no signs, you don't know when, if you had known, right? But know this, that if the goodman of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched, and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. Therefore, be ye also what? Ready. Ready for what? For the Lord's return, for the last day. Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, what's going to happen? The Son of Man cometh. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler of his household, to give them meat in due season? Blessed is that servant, whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. Who's going to be the blessed servant at the second coming? Those of us who have been watching and we're ready for Jesus to come back. That's who's going to be blessed, isn't it? Verily I say unto you, verse 47, that he shall make him ruler over all his goods. That's an illustration proving that all the riches of heaven are going to be open to those of us who are faithful at the Lord's second coming. Isn't that positive? Isn't that wonderful? But you know how Jesus will end something? Jesus will end something on a negative note. Most preachers, if someone ever tries to teach you to preach, they'll say, don't ever end on a negative note. Jesus did it all the time. About every sermon he preached, he ended on a negative. Look at this. But and if that evil servant shall say in his heart, my Lord delayeth his coming. Jesus isn't coming back today. I'm going to live another 25 years. I got time. All right. But and if that evil servant shall say in his heart, my Lord delayeth his coming, and begin to smite his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunken, living however they want to live, doing whatever it takes to please themselves, right? Not thinking one thing about Christ, about the gospel, about the second coming, nothing. It's just another day, right? The Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he looketh not for him, and in an hour that he is not aware of. My cousins had a daddy that could illustrate this perfectly. When he was gone, they didn't do a thing. They laid around and did nothing. But if they heard that their daddy was on the way, you better look busy. You better get up and you better get double stepping and doing whatever he told you to do this day. You better get it done now. But you know what he'd do? He wouldn't fire a warning shot. He'd just show up, and there we'd be laying in there on the couch doing nothing. And there was weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, when the Lord comes back, listen, let me give you something to consider that's really not that funny. When he comes back, it's ready or not. The only thing that we know is that the Bible teaches he's coming back like a thief in the night. That's all we know. Now, what if the Lord comes back today while we're goofing off? Are we prepared? Notice what's going to happen if we're not prepared. And shall cut him in sunder. Shall cut him asunder. Almost like cutting him in half. And appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. What's the application, Lord? If we're not ready when he comes back, we're going to hell. How's that for positive? How's that? Now, that's the way Jesus preached. Listen to the text, brethren. Let it sink in, friend and neighbor. If we begin working and we give up before Jesus comes, we will receive no reward. We will only receive punishment. I'm glad that you worked hard for the Lord 10 years ago, but we ain't in 10 years ago. We're here today. Are we ready today? Are we watching, and are we ready today for Jesus to come back? No one knows the day or hour of Jesus' return, but we know it will happen. Are we ready? We don't have to wander through this life without hope and assurance. We can know that we're ready. Preparation eliminates panic. Prepare now and stay prepared, and there will be no reason to panic if Jesus comes right now. Let me tell you how to prepare for the second coming of the Lord. You need to be in Christ. You need to have your sins washed away by the blood of Christ. Hear the truth. Acts 18:8. Believe the truth. Acts 16:31. Repent of sin. Acts 17:30. Confess Jesus Christ to be the Son of God. Acts 8:37. Be immersed in water for the remission of sins. Acts 2:38. Then the Lord has added you to his church, the church of Christ. What happens when I sin as a Christian? Acts 8:22. Repent therefore of this thy wickedness, and pray God, if perhaps the thought of thine heart may be forgiven thee. Wherever you are, we're here because we love you, but you have to come. Do so now as together we stand and as we sing the song of encouragement.